All right, diving in today, folks, to a territory that's, well, pretty heavy stuff. Eating disorders.
Yeah, not exactly light dinner conversation.
Nope. But crucial to get a grip on. And our guide today is Mary Levens and her book, Eating Disorders and Magical Control of the Body. Subtitle, this is important, Treatment Through Art Therapy.
So we're not just talking diagnoses here, but how to actually help people.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we've pulled some, well, dense bits, honestly, from the intro, but then chapters on magic, eating, how body image gets all messed up, even this idea of, like, eating the body, which is intense.
That's a bit Freudian. Yeah.
Definitely. Plus, how art therapy fits in the whole therapist-patient dance, loads to unpack. Our goal, for you to walk away really grasping what's going on inside the minds of folks battling anorexia and bulimia.
The why behind the behavior, yeah.
Exactly. Because it's rarely about food alone, right?
Absolutely. Now, Levens keeps hammering on this idea of magical thinking, not like, your lucky socks, it's deeper.
Oh, I get that. Like, as kids, we all kind of think wishing hard makes things happen.
Exactly. And Evans Pritchard, the anthropologist, he saw this in cultures, how magic beliefs can actually help them function, society stuff.
So, not always a bad thing.
Right. But with eating disorders, Levens is saying it goes dark. Desperate, even.
Becomes less about connecting with others, more about, like, isolating oneself.
Yeah, a coping mechanism that backfires tragically. And important to note, Levens, she's coming at this from psychoanalysis.
So it's Freud, Jung, that whole world.
Yep. But she pulls in myths, anthropology, religion, literature. It's not just a sterile textbook. It's
More human, maybe.
definitely. Now, basics for our listeners, anorexia, we're talking big weight loss, period stopping in women, and this terror of getting fat. Bulimia, it's the binge purge cycle, feeling out of control around food.
And Levens is focused on women mostly, right?
Yeah, higher prevalence, but the insights apply broadly. Key point, the anorexic patient, often they don't feel there's a problem because that control, it serves a purpose for them mentally.
Makes sense. If it's their coping mechanism, letting go is scary. So magic.
Hmm.
How is it different in eating disorders than, say, a tribe's rain dance?
Good question. See, Evans Pritchard, with those tribes, their magic was social, it reinforced community. But this pathological kind, Levens describes, it's driven by, I don't know, almost a brokenness inside.
Trying to fix it through these rituals.
Yeah, but isolating ones. It's like they think they can magically disconnect from their own bodies.
By controlling their weight, they control their feelings.
Powerful insight, like smaller body, less feeling. Levens talks about art therapy, patients believing a strong line around their self-portrait makes them actually safe.
Whoa!
Yeah. Or with food, strict calorie rules, like a magical shield, against being invaded by the food itself.
Makes it sound almost like a monster under the bed that they're warding off.
Exactly. And this control, it becomes their crutch, a magic wand they cling to. Letting go.
Yeah.
Terrifying. And that's a developmental point, right? We learn to handle frustration, disappointment, even pain.
Part of growing up.
Yeah. But magical thinking, it tries to sidestep all that. Levens warns, this constant quick fix mentality, it weakens us in the long run. Withering of mental muscles, she calls it.
Use it or lose it. But applied to emotional resilience, huh?
Precisely. Now, psychoanalysis and magic, how do they define it?
I'm all ears.
Well, Rycroft, he talked about these primitive practices trying to influence nature supernaturally, doing stuff that resembles the desired outcome, like...
Sympathetic magic.
Yeah, that's it. And Freud, more bluntly, he said, magic's about bending nature to our will. Which, think about eating disorders, fits perfectly right.
It's all about control, yeah.
Total control over their body, mind dictating every process. Because that mind-body connection, it's not integrated. So they overcompensate externally to fix the internal lack.
Complicated stuff.
It is. Freud also talked about how babies, they kind of magically think they can will stuff into existence. Omnipotence of thoughts, he called it. Then there's Piaget with his participation concept.
Participation, like in a school play.
Not quite. It's more like feeling connected to something or someone so strongly that influencing one influences the other. Not logically, but felt.
Oh, so like if I imagine my rival tripping hard enough, they'll actually trip.
Haha, well, that's the magical thinking. But see, this participation, it can blur the lines between an object and its representation in our minds.
So changing the thought changes the thing itself.
Bingo, like those rituals, actions becoming the focus, not their original purpose. Baby cries, gets fed, but later, crying itself becomes the way to get mom to act, not just expressing hunger.
Fascinating. Now, animism. I know Freud was big on that, right?
Yeah, he saw animism giving spirits to inanimate objects and that omnipotence of thoughts as driving magical beliefs, both in like primitive humans and folks with neuroses. Piaget, he nuanced it, saying there's differences between those groups. But the point is that line between ourselves and the world gets blurry sometimes.
Like someone yawns and suddenly I want to yawn.
Exactly. And stress, it can make this worse, pushing us towards magical thinking to cope. Levens, she even has this patient, the doll lady.
Oh, yeah, I read that part. Hundreds of dolls, right?
Over 200. And she treated them like real people, each with a personality. One doll, she was convinced, made her eat against her will.
Like possessed by a doll.
Basically, it wasn't until she burned it, literally, that she felt free of its power. So beliefs shaping actions right in front of us.
Makes you wonder how much of what we do is truly us versus these deeper forces.
Big question. Now, religion, it also uses this concrete thinking sometimes.
Oh, right, like rituals and symbols.
Exactly. Freud called it primary process thought, giving shape to abstract ideas. Levens talks about Judaism moving from concrete forms to monotheism, even the Old Testament. Personal magic's bad, but prophets do authorize magic, right?
Parting the Red Sea, kind of hard to top that.
Right. Or Yom Kippur, the scapegoat ritual, sins put on an animal and sent away, concretely dealing with guilt. But Salvini Palazzoli, she warns, anorexics, they're not being abstinent like some holy person. It's not a spiritual discipline.
More compulsive, maybe?
Yeah, and Levens has this art therapy example. A bulimic patient really shows this in action.
Oh, yeah, we don't have it.
So this woman, super guilty after talking to her mom, instead of words, she just throws paint on a huge canvas chaotically.
Venting through art, huh?
Totally.
Yeah.
But then therapist has her cut it up, rearrange it into like one figure inside another, physically doing it, embodying her messed up boundaries.
So the act of creating is part of the therapy itself.
Exactly. Now we got to bring in the feminist views on this too.
Always got to look at the bigger picture, right?
Absolutely. So feminists, they talk about the pressure on women's bodies, the ideal images we're bombarded with.
Which often aren't even real, thanks to Photoshop.
Right. The paradox Levens points out, the anorexic getting thinner. They're moving away from these supposed ideals, getting more isolated.
So it's not really about meeting those standards.
Nope. Deeper stuff. For folks Levens calls primitive personality, borderline, even psychotic, the symptoms are a lifeline.
A messed up one, but still.
Yeah, because they serve a purpose. Plus, trouble with symbolic thinking, so thoughts and actions blur. Can't process emotions mentally, so they act out like binges to get rid of the discomfort.
Body as the outlet, not the mind.
Exactly. Even a mean thought can feel like they've hurt someone. That real. So magic in eating disorders versus in like a shaman's healing ritual. The difference isn't the belief itself, but what's going on underneath.
Context is everything, right?
Exactly. Mary Douglas, she even warned us about judging other cultures through our psychology lens.
Like their magic might not be about the same struggles we see in a patient.
Right. Huge point. Now let's talk food. Levin stresses its significance in every culture.
Food, family, it's all tied together for most of us.
Yeah. And the rituals around famine, feasting, how we handle food, it matters. Bruce, he noticed in some cultures, famine and overeating both exist. And even expecting to overeat can point to this underlying fear of scarcity.
Like, gotta stock up while you can.
Exactly. Like Pharaoh's dream, the fat cows, then the thin ones, plenty, then lack. Very different from, say, Roman vomitoriums, where overeating probably wasn't so guilt-ridden.
So our fear of lack, whether literal food or emotional stuff, drives the behavior.
Insightful. Levens highlights anorexics. They crave separation, boundaries to feel safe. Accepting food from mom can even be scary, like incorporating her.
Whoa, deep.
Yeah. Think of Marion in The Edible Woman, Atwood's character. She's got this animistic view of eating, like the carrot's a being.
So eating's almost cannibalistic for her.
Kinda. And that discomfort with eating something like oneself, it's common in eating disorders. It's serving their needs, not the culture.
That's just picky eating is deeper.
Exactly. Bruch also describes this schizophrenic girl overeating to cover her sore inside from others' anger, like literally shielding with food.
Food as armor, that's a new one.
For sure. Now, for anorexics, restricting food can paradoxically create this euphoria, a high almost.
Starvation high.
Yeah, weird, right? Reinforces their belief in their body being special, magical, mind-body split happens, they feel invincible, immortal even. But then eating gets linked to eating people in their mind.
Okay, now that's getting disturbing.
It is. Food becomes animated, like it has power over them. Levin says this fantasy comes up a lot in art therapy.
So food is both the enemy and the craving. No wonder it's so messed up.
Exactly. Comforting and intrusive. And they got to control everything. In and out, plus concrete thinking, so even a therapist's words can feel like a physical violation.
Like being poked by an idea.
Yeah. So onto this magical control of the body, why do they do it?
Yeah, if it's so harmful, why cling to it?
Levin says it's when they feel powerless everywhere else. Voiceless, no sense of self, their body becomes the one thing they can control.
Makes sense in a messed up way.
Totally. So frantic cleansing, chasing thinness, it's about controlling the helpless body, both in the world and just, biologically. Deep down, it's controlling their whole world, inner and outer, to avoid feeling abandoned.
Because if I control everything, nothing can hurt me. That kind of thinking.
Exactly. We're born helpless, relying on others, and this wish for total control, it's like denying that neediness. Guntrip even said, anorexia is a whole life philosophy, not just a symptom.
Avoiding needing anyone.
Yeah. And the mother relationship, huge. Levin says it's not just symbolically refusing her food, it's deeper. Like a pre-verbal connection to mom's body.
Like literally feeling merged.
Yeah. This longing to possess mom again, recreate that early perfect feeling, but through their own magic now. But merging is scary too, right?
Yeah.
Being swallowed up. Distancing is scary too, abandonment. So they're stuck.
Damned if you do, damned if you don't.
Exactly. Glasser calls this the core complex. Can't be close, can't be far, gotta control it all. And this extends to how they picture people in their minds too.
Not just real people, but the idea of them.
Yeah. Like an addict thinking they control the drug. It's this magical ability to take in and expel the mother figure at will, wanting autonomy. Salvini Palazzoli even said, thinness feels like a magic key to power.
Unlocks something they crave.
Totally. And remember, early on, mom's both food and love. So for these folks, emotional taking in has got to be physical too. Vomiting's like expelling bomb.
So all this is playing out on their body, but it's really about these deep relationships.
Powerful insight. And it's magic fulfilling narcissistic needs that reality can't. Like Sowers, he talked about the anorexic seeing her body as this passive, helpless thing, vulnerable to food and mom.
No willpower. Got to create it artificially.
Yeah, only power is separating flesh from the self. It's that invasion feeling again, which links to psychic cannibalism later on. Big mind-body split.
Like they're trying to transcend being physical altogether.
Yeah, kinda. Levens calls it craving a numinous reality, beyond normal limits, like shamans, mystics, denying the body for something higher.
Yeah.
Different from, say, AA, where you accept limitations, right? Splitting yourself just weakens you in the end.
So magical thinking, a false comfort, it traps you rather than frees you.
Right. And Salvini Palazzoli, she said, anorexics fear their own bodies. Eating's like the body winning over the true self. Quote, being a body is being a thing. As it grows, the person shrinks. Symbolizing being separate, it's all tangled up.
Heavy stuff.
It is. And that mind-body dualism, body's just an object, separate, controllable. Levens even links this to potential abuse, where the self-harm isn't just physical, it's echoing being used by others, maybe.
Like reenacting the trauma to try and master it.
Possibly. And with bulimia, Levens talks about space. These folks terrified of emptiness inside and out.
Got to fill the void somehow.
Right, binging, substances, even cutting themselves. Others filling the space becomes their only definition, codependent, trying to feel continuous, connected because they can't hold on to their own self-image.
Like if I'm not full of something, I'll cease to exist.
Powerful way to put it. Boundaries, man, huge topic.
Boundaries, like personal space stuff?
Yeah, but psychologically, it's about experiencing others, mom especially, as separate from you. That's how we get our own WN boundaries, from that initial fusion.
So if that goes wrong early on?
Messes up everything. Boundaries give us definition, structure, containment, knowing what's me, what's not me, inside, outside. Even time gets warped.
Time too.
Yeah, think about it. And for art therapy, it's wild, because creativity needs both distinction, you and the object, and deflexible boundaries to play with ideas.
So it's a skill in itself, having good boundaries.
Totally. Now, eating disorder folks, they swing between protecting against that emptiness with rigid walls, then fearing annihilation if anything gets in. Eating crosses the boundary, hunger makes you want something outside, separateness, scary stuff.
Because needing someone means being vulnerable.
Bingo. And separation, if it feels like being cut off from that early oneness, it's like death. Got to reconnect, food, chemicals, anything to recreate mom.
Addiction makes sense in that light.
For sure. And that devourer we mentioned, they fight it internally while seeming independent. Body image, it's not just what we see, it's taking in how others see us and us projecting OUT parts of ourselves, like how we develop thinking even.
So messed up body image, it means messed up relationships too.
Exactly. Less developed, it's like your body's in flux, pieces, easy to magically think you can add or expel parts. And body image goes beyond just the physical, it's space too.
Like how close is too close.
Exactly. Early on, we test that, what can come in. So distorted perceptions in these folks, it's often measuring the outline, not getting that their internal experience is fragmented, always changing.
So the tape measure doesn't tell the whole story.
Not at all. And how they use others, if they've been used, they might use others as narcissistic self-objects, needing them to complete themselves. Rose, she said body image is symbolized really early, like physical changes become linked to how mom treated us, good or bad.
So my adult body issues might be about my mom, not just society.
Could be. And no firm boundaries growing up is scary. Anorexics, they build defenses against internal badness, which becomes food, literally.
Makes the restriction make more sense.
Yeah.
Their logic.
Right. Distinguishing inside-outside is tough, so anything going in is anxiety-provoking. Binging sometimes, it's about creating a boundary through the full stomach. Physical limit when mental ones are failing.
Makes you wonder if those stomach surgeries mess with that even more.
Good point. Bruce, he had this obese boy. Terrified his jelly body would spill out if he got hurt. So he ate constantly, no containment.
Food is a bandage.
Yeah. Levens also had the patient who painted a locked cottage, that was her body, afraid of being entered. Control over what's in and out, she said, I choose when I throw up. And the one who wouldn't stand near the fridge, calories escaping, animism, flimsy boundaries.
Like food has a will of its own.
Totally. Raphael Leff, she theorized that anorexic women, their boundary issues, it's from mothers who can't handle separateness. So the daughter, later, she controls her orifices, like reclaiming territory.
Makes me think of those chastity belts controlling women's bodies. Yikes.
Interesting parallel. Point is, that constant, firm body image, it's rare in these folks. Boundaries shift easily or vanish. Pato, he described this anorexic girl. Her body felt like jelly, merged with the therapists.
No.
Yeah, it's like back to infancy, vague body merging with mom, Freud's oceanic feeling, ego one with the universe. Sylvia Plath, she wrote about this, that pull to merge versus the reality of being separate.
Poetry can really nail those feelings.
Absolutely. But back to boundaries, we need them, right? Bick talked about the second skin, holding the baby together mentally. A hole in that is psychic breakdown. Defenses go up, projection, interjection, Klein stuff.
So when that early stage goes wrong, we spend our lives trying to fix it.
Kinda. Piaget said early on, it's all a flow, no clear boundaries, mom's good care, creates the unity. But Boris, he described anorexics lacking this. Their hunger's not for food, but for an object.
A person, not a plate.
Yeah. Food's a counterfeit for wanting that fusion, but then gotta separate to not be engulfed, so they can't handle that in-between space.
Like Goldilocks, but with relationship.
Exactly. They make their own internal space, envy mom's breast, but can't have it. Danger. That inner space, it's survival, but no skin, Food entering is a violation of me, core gets touched. Chewing forever, slowing down that becoming one.
Makes me think of how we say, you are what you eat, but for them, it's literal fear.
Spot on. And Klein, she had this idea of the infant attacking mom internally, sadistically, so food inside can have that power, not just the act of eating.
Okay, on to this eating the body stuff. From the beginning, how does it start?
Levin says it's rooted in feeding, literally. That mom-baby interaction, it's primal. Dinah and her mom in the book shows this. Feeding makes mom part of the kid. The mouth isn't just physical, it's emotional life. First give and take, we know.
And that shapes how we view relationships forever.
For sure. Kissing, biting, it's all there. Early on, food equals mom, she's total fulfillment. And the baby, they have these devouring wishes, want to possess, internalize mom. It's either baby has mom or mom has baby, no in between.
Like that game where one hand swallows the other?
Perfect analogy. But then, realizing mom's separate, that's when dependency hits, and it's scary. Envy comes up, gotta merge to manage it.
So we're all on that spectrum, wanting to be alone, wanting to be one with someone.
Yeah. But eating disorder, folks, relatedness is hard. Symbiotic attachment, no real boundaries. Dependency's terrifying because it needs boundaries. So merging is the illusion, but engulfment threat is huge EE.
A trap they set for themselves, basically.
Sadly, yeah. Now, Freud's incorporation, that's key. taking an object inside mentally for pleasure or its power. Totally normal early on how we relate.
It gets stuck for some.
Exactly. And it links to cannibalistic psychoanalytic term. Freud even tied it to identification, like eating dad to be dad. Oral stage, it's all about taking things in.
Makes me think of that old saying, you are what you eat.
Haha. Right. Abraham, he had this patient fixated at that stage. Loving was eating something good. Wanted to swallow his nurse whole. Levin says anorexic vegetarians, some of them, consciously link meat to human flesh. And fantasies of biting off body parts, that's there too.
Okay, this is getting kind of creepy.
It is. And for some, these feelings, it's isolating. They withdraw from real people, go into their heads, or replace relationships with substances or food itself.
Makes sense. If connecting means devouring, better to be alone.
Sadly, yeah. So incorporation, fusion, it's their way to get intimacy, soothing they can't create themselves. A real person doing that is too uncontrollable.
Because they can't eat them up and make them perfect.
Exactly. And it's addictive, this cycle. They want freedom, but that means surviving alone in a relationships without the eating disorder. No good.
So the thing that helps them cope also keeps them stuck.
Tragic, yeah. Separation anxiety is huge. They can't hold on to good images of caregivers internally, so gotta merge more. To manage the fear of the object destroying them, they gotta control closeness or do those short, intense relationships.
Like getting too deep too fast, then bailing.
Yeah. And the core fear, it's that saving themselves, being a separate person, means destroying the one they need. So those cannibalistic wishes, they block the very relationship that would help them grow.
Irony, huh?
Big time. And without those holding interjects, those internal good parent figures, being alone is panic, empty. Levin says it's aloneness versus loneliness. Different.
Yeah, I get that. Alone can be peaceful. Lonely is awful.
Exactly. And that drives the impulsivity, binging, cutting, gotta feel something to prove they exist. Envy's one theory, but Levin's focuses on survival. If your sense of self is weak, you might devour someone who seems holy.
Like taking their essence by consuming them.
Yeah. Klein, she had this thing about babies having sadistic fantasies towards mom. First the breast, then the whole body, wanting to attack, eat her up. Patients with these fantasies, Levin says, they kind of hope that by eating the other, they'll become whole.
Because the other person has a body, a self, that they lack.
Powerful insight. And it's all confused who wants what, where it comes from, ownership, what even is a self. Levin's questions if there even are two bodies in those early relationships. It's so merged. Patient wrote about her mom's feelings and her own. No difference.
Makes you wonder how much we ever really separate.
Deep, man. And not being separate, it's incorporative thinking then. The boundary expands till it includes the person you want. They're scooped up, part of you. Good things can't stay separate.
Makes you think of those collectors. Got to own every rare item. Can't just admire it.
Yeah. Now the mouth, orality, it's huge in all this. Freud called it primal narcissism. We need to eat, so that zone's important.
Makes sense. First pleasure is through the mouth.
Yeah. Breast feels like part of you. Sucking's the gratification. Libido's all oral, then biting comes in, more aggressive. Good things are things you can eat.
So how does that play out later in life?
Well, the oral character, always focused on getting stuff, fulfilling those dependent needs, might be stingy or overly giving to compensate. Anorexia itself, old theory said, it's defending against oral fantasies, even oral impregnation. Later, it's less about that, more about that oral stage not being resolved. Separation's messed up.
Stuck at that baby stage, in a way.
Kinda. Anorexic might fantasize about taking in a bad mom and their body, ice mom, so starving's like ending that feminization, the messed up identity.
Battling mom inside their own flesh.
Whoa, yeah. They feel consumed by her. And the paradox, they look vulnerable, open, but internally it's all about defense. Can't express stuff mentally, so the body does it. Kestenberg said, the mouth becomes the symbol for all openings.
So anything going in is loaded.
Huge. Food can be comfort, rage, sex, wanting a penis, pregnancy. We use food metaphors constantly, especially for love. Atwood's edible woman, the cake woman, that's animating food.
Replacing a person with an edible thing.
Yeah. And this animism, it links to those cannibalistic fears. Freud said animism's just us projecting OUT, our stuff. Piaget saw it in kids, too, with food.
So normal for a while, then becomes a problem.
Right. Abraham, he had this patient, wouldn't eat to avoid being a cannibal, like self-punishment. Bulimics, their binging can be taking mom in, but then guilt, fear of destroying the needed object.
So mom's both good and bad, just like food itself.
Exactly. Infant's destructive, wants to rip the good stuff out. Mom's food becomes poisonous because of their own attacks, like peeing, pooping, it's mutual attack around eating.
Wow, that's dark.
It is. And Davidson, Faye, they had a patient. Spaghetti was crawling green snakes. Another one painted spaghetti, then got scared of it suffocating her. Food has the power, projected from the therapist initially.
Like what I can't control and you all control in this thing.
Exactly. And look at myths, fairy tales, foods animated all over, taboos against eating your own group. It's primal. Campbell talked about the mother goddess, nourishing A&D dangerous. Kali, Annapurna, Isis, Ishtar, all got that duality.
Creation and destruction, feminine power, all that.
Totally. Eat or be eaten is everywhere. Saturn eating his kids, survival stuff. Then you got the witch in Hansel and Gretel. Baba Yaga, straight up ogresses. Merging through eatings there too. Eucharist, wedding feasts, deep stuff.
Makes you hungry and scared to eat all at once.
Haha, right. And Freud again, eating a part of someone, you get their traits, hence the precautions like pregnant women's food rules. It's all connected.
Okay, let's get into art therapy specifically. Why is it so useful here?
Art therapy's great because it's not just expressing, it's doing. Levens talks about losing yourself through expanding as a temporary ego escape, like those out-of-body experiences Carol described them in concentration camp survivors denying their reality. Pinkow, too, with psychotic patients.
So if your boundary's that bad, got to control something.
Exactly. Anorexia, bulimia, it's constant chaos management. Levens has this example. Bulimic patient, felt helpless. Therapist has her cut out body parts from paper, make a body.
Like a collage.
Yeah. And that act, it creates a boundary, literally. Then she could paint her shape, work through the identity confusion, which was tied to her mom's looks and her being super competitive.
So no wonder she felt like a fragmented self.
Right. And dissolving boundaries can also make this like transcendental mental space. No limits to avoid the body's limits. They need containment, but also gotta exist outside the body.
Right.
Paintings of themselves on mountains, clouds, all that.
Escape through art.
Yeah. Anorexics, they don't want help with the body. Bulimics, they're stuck in the loop, emptying, refilling. Art materials, it's concrete, you control it. Like Winnicott's potential space between us and reality, play happens there.
So the art room becomes that safe space.
Precisely. And the images themselves. Boundaries galore, locked doors, walls, curtains, it's all keep out. Whatever's let in, gotta be controlled, hence the binge terror. Bulimic folks, Levens says, they fantasize about eating the paint or it being vomit. Substance in and out, a bodily thing happening on the canvas.
Makes me think of those performance artists who, like, smear stuff on themselves.
Yeah. Pinko, with psychotics, he used art to literally show them their body. Once there's a form container, they can relate to it. Levin says eating disorder's different. They're already body-focused, just in a bad way.
So we got to shift how they relate to it.
Yep. And Klein, she had this thing about the infant's object. It's inside or outside, but still part of them when it's out. Boundaries are messed up. Art, therapy, it gives a framework to define them. But expanding without a core self, Levens warns, that's just substituting.
Like, I'm great at art, but my life's still a mess.
Yeah, I got to connect to that core. And family stuff. In anorexia, mom often feels invaded by the daughter. So the daughter, afraid of intrusion, does it in reverse by not taking in. Therapy helps them see their own needs.
Because it's always a two-way street, those relationships.
For sure. Patient painted formless colors, wanting to fuse with the therapist, be sucked in. The goal, Levin says, is that secure, separate self, owning the bad parts they've split off. Food abuse masks the panic of being alone. The addict wants a human drip they control, because inside, it's fragmented.
So the symptoms are a cry for help, but in a messed up language.
Exactly. Art therapy helps translate that language, rebuild the self, learn relationships.